Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. I was at the kitchen table in my work shirt, laptop still warm, when she leaned back in her chair and dropped the sentence that shifted the room an inch to the left. Love doesn't mean you get to touch me. My name is Aaron Hayes. I'm 38, an IT systems manager in Raleigh, North Carolina. 9 years married, 2 cars in the driveway. The refrigerator hummed. I watched her eyes stay flat after the words landed. I nodded once. The way you nod at a fire alarm when you first hear it and aren't sure if it's a drill. The truth is, I'd been hearing the soft clicks for months. The tiny lock sounds. A hug at the door that turned into a shoulder bump. A kiss that found my cheek while her eyes looked somewhere behind me. Bedtime rolled into parallel scrolling. 2 screens, a gulf between. I asked if she wanted to watch something together and got a shrug that felt like a closed curtain. None of it was a crisis on its own. Together, it was a quiet rewrite of our whole script. I told myself we were tired, that work seasons come in waves. But I knew I was filing those moments away. She called it boundaries. The word arrived one afternoon with a new tone in her voice, the kind of careful pronunciation people use when they've just learned a term and want to set it on the table so it can be admired. Boundaries about time. Boundaries about emotional labor. Boundaries about bodily autonomy, which is a phrase that sounds like it came airmailed from somewhere that sells tote bags with slogans. I respect boundaries. My job is full of them. Access levels, audit trails, least privilege. So when the kitchen sentence landed, love doesn't mean you get to touch me. I didn't argue. I closed the laptop gently, like you do in a conference room when a meeting turns sideways and you decide note-taking is done. The evening stayed ordinary in all the mechanical ways. She took the couch corner with her phone. I answered 2 emails about a backup job that overruns on Wednesdays. We didn't talk about what she'd said, which is a kind of talking. The silence grew into a third guest that sat on the rug and pretended not to listen. When I offered tea, she said she wasn't in the mood. When she yawned, I asked if she wanted the blanket. She pulled it over her knees without looking at me. It's remarkable what the body learns. Mine learned to be still. In bed, I lay on my back and counted ceiling lines like I used to count jump rope beats as a kid. 9 years of us replayed in fast cuts. A rental with thin walls and a broken porch light. A Saturday morning painting the spare room. A honeymoon hike where she gripped my wrist crossing wet rocks, laughing at how dramatic I was about balance. Her hand used to find me at night without thinking, a quiet, anchoring touch that said we were in the same boat. I tried on every possible response in my head. The defensive one, the wounded one, the persuasive one that quotes books about connection like a man trying to win a debate he shouldn't be in. Each version ended the same way. Me doing all the work of explaining why we mattered and her listening like I was pitching a subscription she could cancel at any time. So I let the words go. The ceiling lines returned to parallel. At 3 a.m., I got up for water. The house at that hour is a different country. The hallway ticks. The refrigerator sighs. I stood by the sink and watched the backyard through the window. Porch light off, fence line crisp, the neighbor's wind chimes stirring. I remembered her telling me last year she loves when I put my hand on her lower back when we cross a street, because it means we're moving through the world together. I wondered when together became negotiable. I wondered when my hand became a claim instead of a comfort. By morning, the practical part of my brain had clocked in. I put on coffee, packed my lunch, fed the dog. She came downstairs in workout leggings and the sweatshirt she steals from my side of the closet. She moved around me like I was furniture she knew how to avoid with her eyes half closed. My hello earned me a soft I almost smiled. Even indifference has its syntax. At the door, I reached for the keys on the hook and noticed the spare set I keep for her parents' house was gone. Maybe she'd borrowed it. Maybe it meant nothing. But that's how systems administrators think. You note the change first, judge it later. Driving to work down Glenwood, traffic thick and familiar, I let the night translate itself into something useful. I wasn't going to beg for a kind of closeness she'd decided to rename as intrusion. I also wasn't going to retaliate like a teenager. At the office, I did what I'm good at. Observed patterns, documented reality, prepared contingencies. I fixed the backup job. I answered a vendor about a patch window. I stared at my screen a little longer than the task required and saw our marriage in the status logs. Warnings ignored, thresholds crossed. Around noon, I caught myself opening a new note titled Boundaries. I laughed under my breath and closed it. No grand announcement. Quiet decisions scale better. On the drive home, rain began, the sudden southern kind that turns brake lights into a red river. I felt oddly calm, not resigned, just clear. The kitchen would still smell like basil. The dog would still snore. She might be on the couch with a show playing she's not really watching. I would walk in, hang my keys, and ask about her day like a normal man in a normal marriage. And I would know, with the kind of knowledge that sets your posture a degree straighter, that something had ended the night before, even if neither of us had drawn the line on paper yet. When I stepped inside, she glanced up, then back to her phone. I took off my shoes. I asked if she'd eaten. A shrug. I made a simple dinner and set a plate near her elbow without comment. She took a bite without looking up. The dog thumped her tail once against the cabinet and went back to being a small furnace by the oven. I ate standing at the counter, watching the steam rise off the pasta and disappear. If there was a breaking point somewhere ahead, I couldn't see it yet. I only knew I wasn't going to walk toward it with my hands outstretched, hoping to be taken. Later, I brushed my teeth and looked at my face in the mirror the way men do when they're making a promise to themselves they won't say out loud. No speech or overtures. The next move would be quiet and exact. I turned off the bathroom light and let the house go dark room by room, the way you shut down a server gracefully so nothing corrupts on the way down. In bed, I lay still and listened to the rain soften. I marked the distance and accepted it. Morning arrived like nothing had happened, which somehow made it worse. She came down in the same gray hoodie, hair twisted into that loose knot she does when she isn't trying. The dog circled her ankles. I poured coffee and slid the mug across the counter. She took it, murmured thanks into the steam, and scrolled her phone as if the previous night's sentence had been a weather report. I waited for a glance, a foot reaching for mine under the table, even a half joke to break the ice. Nothing. The quiet wasn't a pause, it was policy. She started narrating her schedule without looking up. Pilates at 11. A stop at Whole Foods. Maybe happy hour with Danny, and live if she felt socially resourced. That phrase sat on the counter like a new appliance. I asked if she needed the car. She said she'd Uber, boundaries with rides, she added, almost playful. A few minutes later my phone buzzed with a meme, a neon graphic about consent and how men only want one thing, and it's exhausting. No caption, just the image, floating there between our shared calendar and a dentist reminder, like a small flare fired into a blue sky. I typed and deleted it before sending. The last thing I wanted was to audition for the role of defensive husband in a group chat I wasn't invited to. At work, my morning filled itself with ticket queues and a vendor call. During lunch, I opened a blank note and wrote, "We're not roommates." Then I backspaced it to nothing. I don't write for effect. I write instructions, steps to replicate, steps to recover. So I turned my attention where it belonged. What had shifted? Not just touch. Access. The thousand small conveniences that run under our life like clean code. My time on demand, my car, my passwords, my name on bills that simply get paid. I could see the dependency tree clearly now, not as leverage, but as fact. If her stance was that love didn't entitle me to reach for her, the parallel was already forming in my head, calm and inevitable. She texted around 3. "Can you grab almond milk, quinoa, and that shampoo I like?" No question mark. I said sure and added anything else. She replied with a photo of a brand and get to. Efficient. Impersonal. I walked the grocery aisles and felt the oddness of being both provider and intruder in the same hour. At checkout, the clerk asked paper or plastic and I heard myself say, "Whatever keeps things from breaking." It sounded like a joke. It wasn't. When I got home, she was in the living room with a long podcast playing about unpaid emotional labor. She paused it when I entered, not out of respect, but like a teacher stopping a video when the principal walks in. The kitchen sink remembered nothing about our marriage. It held dishes that weren't mine and a pan with drying sauce crusted to its lip. I rinsed what I'd used and left the rest. Small experiment. She watched me notice and said, lightly, "I'll do it later, don't be controlling." I nodded. The pan listened. We ate separately, she with a bowl on the couch, me at the counter again. She kept up a low commentary directed at her phone, hearts and "OMG yes" sprinkled between bites. When I asked about her day, she gave me the highlight reel, a good sweat, a great playlist, an annoying cashier who didn't understand boundaries. I asked, carefully, which boundaries? She blinked slow, asking me why I'm buying wine on a Wednesday. I said nothing, because every word I spent defending my right to exist in a conversation was a word I wouldn't have later when I needed them. After dinner, she stood at the mirror by the door, adding gloss. Girls' night, she said. We're doing a pre-game for nothing, which is sometimes everything. She tugged the sleeve of my sweater like I was a mannequin and put it back. You don't have to wait up. I smiled. I don't, I said, and meant it. She hesitated a beat, expecting me to argue, or at least ask how late. When I didn't, her face flickered through 3 expressions I couldn't name. She left with a breezy, love you. The sort of person throws over a shoulder to keep the inventory looking full. I didn't wait up. I cleaned my bowl, walked the dog beneath a bruised blue sky, and sat at the table with a legal pad. Not to write threats or tally grievances, just to map what had become automatic. The rotation of errands, the default planning, the reflexive, I've got it, that had shaped itself into habit around us. I underlined nothing. I just looked. In the margin I wrote, respect is an on-off switch. Then I circled it, because some truths aren't gradual. She came in a little after 11, smelling like a citrus candle in a bar. Her laugh arrived 3 steps before she did. She kicked off her shoes and gave me the sideways hug that calls itself affectionate. You're still up, she said, surprised in a way that suggested she'd prefer if I weren't. I told her I was finishing something for a maintenance window. She glanced at the legal pad and turned away quickly, like it might reflect her face back at her. Don't overthink, she said, and vanished down the hall. I looked at the clock. The dog sighed dramatically. I finished my list. Over the next 2 days, the pattern hardened. She was cheerfully unavailable, a tone that makes refusal sound like self-care. When I reached for her shoulder in the hallway, she half smiled and said, "Remember what we talked about," as if I were forgetting the new manual. When I didn't reach, she joked that I was being moody. At breakfast, she quipped, "Men always want touch, never talk," and followed it with, "Kidding," in the exact voice people use when they aren't. I asked once, very evenly, "What's actually going on?" She answered with a textbook paragraph about autonomy that sounded like it had citations. None of the sentences had us in them. On Friday, she texted, "My card got flagged again. Can you order my serum? The login won't work." I ordered it. The transaction took 3 clicks. My name, my card, my address. I sat back and watched the confirmation email arrive. One more proof of concept. She had built a life inside the bandwidth of my reliability, and now she was guarding her body from me as if I were the threat to her safety. That evening, I put my keys in the dish and asked if she wanted to watch the old cooking show we used to put on when neither of us cared about the plot. She shrugged. I'm not in a performative domestic mood. It wasn't meant to hurt. It did anyway, but less than before. Pain needs surprise. I was running out of that. I tried one more straight line. Are we okay? Not a trap, just a status check. She considered, then delivered a polished ambiguity. I'm redefining what okay means for me. The sentence hovered between us like a drone. I nodded as if she'd said something concrete. She looked relieved, maybe because she hadn't had to say anything specific I could answer. By Saturday afternoon, the house had started showing the strain. Laundry in drifts, a light bulb dimming toward done, packages on the porch addressed to her with my name on the charge. I fixed the bulb and left the laundry where it lay. She walked by and said, "Don't worry, I'll get to it. Please don't micromanage." I didn't reply. That night, we circled the same small orbit. She humming along to a playlist that had titles about empowerment, me reading the same paragraph 3 times without seeing it. The air felt loaded, as if the house had been holding its breath for days and would soon need to exhale. I could feel the words I'd been assembling click into their eventual shape, calm as a lock engaging. Before bed, she touched my forearm lightly, performative as a stage direction, and said, "We're good, right?" I looked at her hand, then at her face. "We will be," I said, and meant it in a way she didn't hear. She smiled, reassured by a promise I hadn't made. I turned off the lamp. Somewhere in the house, a vent hummed on. The dog shifted as if to say, "Pick a side and stay there." I did. By the time Sunday drew itself tight as a knot, I understood the lesson she'd been teaching, whether she knew it or not. The pressure wasn't accidental, it was diagnostic. Every provocation, every chore left to sit, every quip framed as a joke with a sharpened edge. It all asked me the same question. Will you chase? My answer was already written in the quiet. I wasn't going to chase. I was going to respond. And when I did, it would be with the same clean logic she'd introduced, mirrored back to her with the lights on and the volume low. I waited for the right window the way I planned maintenance at work. No fanfare, just a clean start and a rollback plan I wouldn't need. It came at dinner 2 nights later, a Tuesday quiet enough to be neutral. I made roasted chicken and green beans because they cook themselves if you treat them right. She wandered in late, still glowing from a class, tapped her phone onto the counter like a gavel, and ate standing up. Halfway through, she glanced at me and smirked like a coach after a win. Don't sulk just because I set boundaries. I set my fork down and looked at her directly. You're right. Love doesn't mean you owe me touch. She blinked, waiting for the rebuttal. I gave her the mirror. And marriage doesn't mean I owe you access to me, my income, my effort, my stability on demand. Silence, the good kind. I let it sit there long enough to be real. No raised voice. She shifted the bowl in her hands like it had gotten heavier. For a second, I saw the math cross her face. Then the script came back. That's a false equivalence. It's symmetry, I said. You set yours. I'm setting mine. I didn't elaborate. I wiped the counter, put my plate in the dishwasher, and went to my desk. When you run systems for a living, you learn that change is less about emotion and more about configuration. I opened my password manager, closed my eyes for a beat, and began. First, accounts. I removed the authorized user status from the credit card she used for lifestyle purchases. Household essentials remained on autopay from my account. Mortgage, utilities, insurance. Discretionary items moved off. The grocery list wasn't becoming a battleground, but it also wasn't my private supply chain. I updated Amazon's default payment method to my personal card and flipped off one click for shared lists. I separated streaming profiles and removed my card from any app registered to her email. Small toggles, big message. Access follows responsibility. Next, devices. I changed the Wi-Fi admin credentials and updated firmware while I was there because old habits die useful. I left the network name and password alone. This wasn't about locking doors, it was about who holds the keys. I revoked family sharing on the App Store. She could keep her purchases. She could also keep the bill for them. I backed up the shared calendar and created 2 layers. Household, things that keep a life operating, and personal, things I no longer schedule, nudge, or rescue. I sent her an invite to household with notes, trash day, dog meds, HVAC filter dates. Then I opened a spreadsheet titled Boundaries because naming matters. 2 columns. Column A, what I will continue to cover because I choose to. Column B, what I will not cover because I choose not to. At the bottom, I added a line. Emotional labor is not a budget category. It is either shared or it stops. I printed a copy and slid it into the drawer with the warranties and the passports. She hovered in the doorway watching me type, arms folded like a question. I could feel the engine of her next line revving. You're being cold. I'm being clear. That's the same thing. It isn't, I said. Cold would be pretending not to care and then undermining you. Clarity is telling you exactly where I end and you begin. She rolled her eyes and announced a walk as if a jury had been sequestered. The door closed. I exhaled. I took 10 more minutes and made the kind of phone calls men put off until the day they need them. I set a consult with an attorney. I requested a credit freeze on new lines in my name because the world is full of friendly forms that become liabilities. I created a separate savings account labeled emergency piece and moved an amount that wouldn't be missed but would matter. Most of these contingencies had existed in some half-built way since the first little locks started clicking. I finished the build. When she returned, she was bright again, the way people glow after they've rehearsed a position and feel strong inside it. She asked if I could pick her up from a class Thursday because rideshare surge is insane. I told her I had plans after work and wished her a good session. No accusation. The dog raised an eyebrow at both of us and went back to sleep. The next morning, I adjusted my life without announcing it. I went to the gym early, then to a coffee place I hadn't seen in months because I've been busy being a reliable human hub. I answered no texts until 9. I set my phone to do not disturb after 10 at night and told her, calmly, that non-emergencies could wait until morning. She called it petty. I called it sleep. Her first test came fast. At lunch, she sent a list of errands punctuated with thanks. not a request. A deployment order. I replied with an option set. I can do A and B on Saturday, or you can handle them today. She sent back a screenshot of a meme about weaponized incompetence. I literally laughed, which I think irritated her more than anger would have. I sent a thumbs up and went to my 3 o'clock. That evening, she turned the romance faucet that had been rusted shut. A soft hand on my shoulder, a kiss that landed where it used to, perfume I recognized from better trips. I didn't pull away. Respect goes both directions, or it isn't respect. When she felt the absence of automatic reward, she switched scripts mid-scene. You're punishing me. I'm mirroring you, I said. You taught me yours. I'm teaching you mine. This is financial control. No, I said, voice steady. Control is unilateral and hidden. Boundaries are declared and even. You keep yours. I'll keep mine. We'll see if there's a marriage in the middle. Her face changed again, that quick cycle of disbelief to contempt to calculation. She retreated to the group chat I could hear pinging from the couch. I opened a book, the paper kind, so there'd be nothing for her to accuse me of reading into. The next 2 days looked like a pilot program. I didn't chase, fix, or fill. If she left dishes, they were still there in the morning, and I made my breakfast in a clean pan. If a package arrived for her, I set it by the door and didn't open it. If she texted at 8:59 with a quick favor, I answered at 9:01 with a plan that included her doing it. Nothing cruel, nothing vague, just a man reclaiming the quiet labor he'd been giving away by habit. I also gave her information without drama, which turns out to be its own power. I forwarded a tidy email labeled household coverage with bullet points, what I pay, what I no longer pay, and where she can find logins for the things she now owns. I ended it with one line. If you need clarity, ask with specifics. She didn't reply. The read receipt was enough. That night, I slept like a man whose spine had finally clicked into place. The house sounded like itself again. The dog migrated to the foot of the bed and sighed the way she does when the world feels predictable. In the dark, I thought about how many times men talk themselves into one more compromise because it's easier than the conversation. I decided I was done making easy choices that keep me small. In the morning, I brewed coffee and handed her a mug the way I always have. Rituals matter. She took it, confused by the mixture of kindness and boundary because she's used to seeing them as opposites. We stood in the soft noises of morning. She tested one more time, a light tap of the old script. So are you going to go back to normal, or is this the new phase? Neither, I said. This is me. If we want an us, it has to include both. She didn't have a prepared line for that. She nodded slowly, like someone reading instructions they hadn't expected to need. The day moved forward. The pressure shifted. My hands felt steady on the wheel again. I reclaimed the part of me that doesn't apologize for being a man who requires respect in exchange for his reliability. I kept her words, exactly as she delivered them, and set them beside mine. Then I let the house learn the new settings. The morning after I drew the line, she walked into the kitchen in the sweatshirt from my side of the closet and a new softness in her voice. She brushed my shoulder as she reached for a mug, hung there a beat longer than necessary, then smiled like we were remembering something together. I poured coffee and slid it her way. By noon, she'd pivoted to guilt. A text chain pinged in like a rainstorm. You've become so transactional. Marriage isn't a spreadsheet. I'm trying here. I answered once, clean. I'm not trading punishment for affection. I'm matching access to responsibility. She replied with a photo from our second apartment. A picnic blanket on the floor, pizza box, cheap wine, the two of us laughing with our mouths wide open. We used to be easy, she wrote. I put my phone face down. Memories aren't arguments. They're postcards. The first public crack came at the salon. She called from checkout in a whisper that wasn't quiet. My card just declined. Can you fix whatever you did? I had done nothing dramatic. Just remove the authorized user status I should never have granted on a card feeding boutique whims. Use your card, I said. Mine is for what I cover. The word cover made her inhale sharply. Do you hear yourself? This is financial abuse. I kept my tone even. Abuse is harm in secret. I sent you a list and a budget. You have your own funds. Choose. She hung up. 10 minutes later, a screenshot arrived. A new charge on her card with 3 angry emojis. Progress, I thought, and went back to the ticket queue. That night, she tried seduction with the volume calibrated up. Candle lit, a dress I know she saves, the perfume she used to dab behind her knees. When I walked in, She leaned against the counter like a magazine ad and tilted her chin toward me. My chest noticed. My mind stayed where it needed to be. I closed the candle tin gently and set it aside. You said love doesn't entitle me to your body, I said. I'm respecting that. I won't take what isn't offered freely, and I won't offer what's expected by habit. The first tear was fury, not sadness. You're punishing me for setting boundaries. No, I said, I'm honoring them. And mine. By the weekend, the conveniences started wobbling like a stack of plates. Streaming accounts asked for updated payment. The meal kit subscription pinged her email, not mine. Family sharing prompted her to enter her own card. She held up her phone as if I were a help desk. Why does everything suddenly require me? Because it's yours, I said. Ownership and responsibility travel together. She rolled her eyes so hard it clicked like a switch. You're impossible. I'm consistent, I said, and took the dog out. The group chat went hot. I heard it from the living room. Pings layered over a show neither of us watched. Later that night, a different text came in from a number I recognized but rarely used. Liv, one of the chorus. Hey, I don't agree with how she's handling this. I told her so. If you need me to tell anyone else, I will. I stared at the message. I have no interest in recruiting witnesses, but truth travels its own routes. Appreciated, I wrote back. No need to pick sides. Just ask her to be honest with herself. She hearted it. The silence felt cleaner after that. Sunday dinner became the stage where others began to see it. We had 2 friends over, people who know us well enough to read the gaps. She made a small production of telling the story of my budget memo, angling for a laugh. I let her land it. Then I said, calmly, I sent one email, labeled what I cover and what I don't. It's in her inbox. Our friends went quiet. One of them nodded, slow, like a man who recognizes a clean cut. She changed the subject with a joke that fell on the floor, and I watched her watch it not bounce. The next morning she swung back to blame. Do you feel like a man now? She asked, standing in the doorway like a prosecutor. Do you feel powerful cutting off my life? I set my coffee down. I'm not cutting off your life. I'm turning off free services. You have a card, a job, a brain. Use them. She laughed once, a sound with no air in it. You love being the calm one, don't you? No, I said. I love being honest. I would also love being married to a partner, not a critic. That line hit. She left the room and let the door communicate for her. When panic came, it wore the clothes of urgency. A midday text. My gym auto-pay bounced, and they embarrassed me at the desk. I was in a security review call and didn't answer for an hour. Set it to your card. I replied when I could. If you want, I'll help you budget after dinner. She sent back, I don't need your budgeting lessons. Then 5 minutes later, what time? Panic is a teacher. That night she tried one more shape, confessionist strategy. I know I've been difficult, she said on the couch, eyes shining, voice threaded with old softness. I just need you to give me grace while I work through things. I looked at her and believed the part she believed. I have grace, I said. But grace without change is just subsidy. She flinched like I'd thrown something. I kept my hands flat on my knees. You said what you meant. So did I. The house adjusted to the new settings. She washed the dishes she'd been leaving. She moved the laundry without a sigh. She bought her own shampoo and didn't announce it, which, ironically, is what adults do every day without ceremony. And still, I could feel the steam under the lid. Respect had not returned. Midweek, the public mask slipped further. We ran into a neighbor in the building lobby, one of those friendly guys who always has an extra trash bag when you need one. He asked about our weekend. She launched into a monologue about how we're navigating new boundaries and it's so empowering. He glanced at me. I smiled a little. We're learning to mean what we say, I offered. The neighbor nodded. You can always tell when someone has lived through a version of your scene. He held the door for both of us without ranking the order. That night, the group chat erupted so loudly, she finally stepped onto the balcony to take a call. Through the glass, I watched her throw small shapes with her hand, the universal sign language for, can you believe this? When she came back in, her voice was different, less steel, more glass. My mom thinks I should come stay with them for a bit, she said, watching me for flinch or chase. I nodded once. If that's what you need. She studied my face, fishing for the refusal she could fight, the plea she could reward. I gave her neither. She slept on the very edge of the bed, a careful geometry of distance, And in the morning she was sweetness again, a final lap around the track. "Thank you for being patient," she said, kissing my cheek. "I know I'm not easy right now." I made 2 eggs, 1 plate, and slid it toward her anyway. She ate and cried into the yolk and said it wasn't about me. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe that's the problem. I rinsed the pan and set it on the rack. By evening, the decision had gathered itself in the way a storm does when the pressure finally agrees. She stood in the hallway with a small suitcase open on the bench, folding with deliberate care, like she needed the shape of a task to keep from unraveling. "I might go to my parents for a few days," she said, not quite looking at me. I tied the dog's leash and clipped it to the hook by the door. "Do what brings you peace," I said. The dog yawned. Outside, the sky was a flat sheet of Raleigh gray. Inside, I felt the floor settle under me, steady and level. She stood by the bench in the hallway with the small suitcase open like a mouth. I watched her fold with careful hands, the way people fold when they need the task to hold them together. 1 pair of jeans, 2 sweaters, the travel pouch she only uses for overnights. She didn't look at me. I clipped the dog's leash to the hook, moved my keys to the tray, and asked if she needed the charger that lives in the outlet by the door. She nodded, eyes shining. I wrapped the cord and set it in the front pocket of the suitcase. No speeches. She zipped it and exhaled through her nose. "I'll go to my parents for a bit," she said, giving the words a soft landing so they wouldn't break on contact. "If that's what brings you peace," I said. We loaded the trunk together. Her hands shook when she tried to lift the tote with her vanity case, so I took it and set it gently on top of the suitcase, the way you stack a thing you once thought would last forever. The dog followed us to the curb and looked between us like she had a vote. I scratched her head and sent her back inside. On the porch, she hesitated, waiting for apologies to assemble themselves on my tongue. I didn't offer any. The house after she pulled away felt like a held note finally released. Not silence exactly. The kitchen clock ticked. I stood in the doorway and let the rooms be what they were without the layer of tension I'd gotten used to pretending wasn't there. I gathered the glass she'd left on the end table and rinsed it. I put the blanket back into the basket. I walked to the bedroom and moved 3 shirts and a stack of t-shirts onto the empty shelf in the spare room. In the afternoon, I opened my email and saw the attorney's confirmation for Tuesday. I kept the appointment. I'm not interested in court as a sport. I wanted a map for whatever came next, a list of documents, a set of if-thens that would turn fear into tasks. I made a folder named House and dropped in what mattered: deed copies, insurance policies, the boundary spreadsheet. I changed my emergency contact from her to my brother and felt a small click inside, the sound of a latch finding its home. Her message arrived at dusk. "I'm here. Mom made tea. We're going to talk." I replied with a thumbs up and a sentence. "Take the time you need." 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then reappeared. Nothing came through. That, too, was information. The next morning the bed was still crisp on her side. I brewed coffee and put 2 mugs on the counter by habit, then slid one back into the cabinet. I took the dog to the greenway, listened to the usual morning choir, runner's breath, bike tires, the river below the footbridge. On the way home, I stopped by a building I've passed 100 times without seeing. Brick, clean lines, small balconies. A sign out front, 1 bedrooms available. I took a photo of the phone number and kept walking. I wasn't deciding. I was letting my mind practice. By evening, she'd found her footing again. The texts grew longer. I didn't mean, "Love doesn't mean you get to touch me," the way it sounded. I meant I need safety and space to figure myself out. I read it twice and typed a reply that didn't wobble. "I heard you the first time. You're allowed to mean what you said. I'm allowed to act like you meant it." She sent a string of messages about therapy and communication. I said I'm open to counseling if the goal is mutual respect and not rewriting history. No answer to that one. The dog snored at my feet like a machine resetting. The following day, I toured the brick building. A 1-bedroom with afternoon light, a narrow patio that faces a sycamore, a small desk by a window. The leasing agent made practice jokes. I nodded and asked about noise, parking, lease terms. I didn't sign anything. On the drive home, I felt what I wanted to feel. Not revenge, just the knowledge that I had options. Options are quiet courage. I cooked for 1 that night, which is easier than people admit if you don't try to make it a metaphor. Eggs, toast, some tomatoes in a pan until the skins blister. I ate at the table instead of the counter. I left the chair across from me empty on purpose and let the emptiness be exactly what it was, not a tragedy or a threat, just the shape of an honest room. On Friday, I took the ring off and set it in the dish with the keys. I walked the dog, paid the utilities, reviewed the budget that now reflected only what I had agreed to carry. I looked at the line that used to be labeled us and saw that I had already divided it correctly. I cover what I choose, she covers what she chooses, and anything in the middle either gets carried together or not at all. Saturday brought one last attempt at the old game. Can we reset? She wrote. Like, wipe the slate and try again. I stared at the words and felt that familiar urge to volunteer for the cleanup crew. Then I pictured the kitchen the night she said her sentence like a slogan, and the way my silence had felt like dignity instead of defeat. I answered with the only slate that mattered. Yes, if respect is the baseline. If not, no. Minutes later, you're making this conditional. I smiled to myself. Conditions are agreements, I wrote. Manipulations are the other thing. She didn't come home Sunday. The day stretched, simple and unremarkable in a way I'd forgotten could be good. I vacuumed. I fixed the loose hinge on the pantry door. I read 50 pages of a book without checking my phone. In the late afternoon, I drove to the river and stood on the footbridge until the light turned copper and slid off the water. That night, I moved fully into the spare room. I slept like a man whose name is his own again. In the morning, I woke before the alarm, made coffee, and wrote 3 lines on a sticky note I stuck to the inside of the front door. Be clear. Be kind. Don't negotiate respect. I don't hate her. She made a choice. So did I? Maybe she'll do the work and we'll build something honest on the other side. Maybe we won't. I can live with either. What I won't live with is being used for the parts of me that are easiest to consume while the parts that require reciprocity starve. She declared, love doesn't mean you get to touch me. I returned, marriage doesn't mean you get to use me. In the end, she packed a suitcase and left for the safety she trusted more than us. I let her go, because the only person I am responsible for carrying without question is the one signing this. Respect isn't a perk. It's the price of admission. Without it, love is just a slogan on a tote bag. With it, everything else becomes possible.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.